And we continue our conversation about the abortion ballot initiatives in 10 different states. There was a variety of decisions, but these are the 10 states that had those ballot initiatives where voters made their voices known. And Christy Matino was joining us just before the break, really giving us a breakdown in terms of what those results were. But to talk more about the significance in all of this, I do want to bring in Madeline Summerville, who is an attorney and a political analyst. And Madeline, you were with me yesterday talking ahead of those results. I appreciate you joining us once again here on Live Now from Fox. I want to ask you, when it comes to the breakdown of these results, what does it mean to you when it comes to how voters in those states feel about this issue?
Thank you again so much for having me back. So I think that the primary evidence of the fact that voters bought Donald Trump's message on the fact that the states have control now, and people believed it. So I think for a long time, the Republican message on reproductive rights was inconsistent. And I think this is evidence that by the end, that people got it. And I think that was literally in their faces when they had to go in and see it there on the ballot. So I think that was evidence of folks being able to resonate with the message from the Republican Party.
It's interesting because Vice President Harris really made this a priority in her campaign platform, talking almost at every single rally about reproductive freedom, trying to really energize the female base, and also specifically trying to reach out to Republican women, saying, you could hide your vote. You don't have to tell your spouse or your family what you're going to be voting on, but this is an issue that you should care about. It does not seem as though that message resonated with Republican women voters as much as maybe she would have liked it to.
I think that's exactly right. The message didn't resonate with female Republican voters as much as she would have liked. I think that the proposition that Gen Z was going to come out, women who are age 29 and under, that happened. We saw that in the exit polls. But when it comes to women age 40 to 45 plus, those droves who were supposed to come out to support reproductive rights measures, we just didn't see that.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it was because other issues were more of a priority, or really that this is still, a partisan issue and Republican women or Republican voters not wanting to cross that party line?
I think part of it is that voters ended up buying the Republican message. And I think actually J.D. Vance, during his debate, if we go all the way back to that, I think that was the beginning. That was the marker of when I think the tides turned and people could say, okay, I think the Republicans aren't going to do a federal ban on abortion. And then after Project 2025 kind of got pushed to the background and it wasn't up at the front, then people were less afraid in general of a federal abortion ban, because I think that was the primary fear. But when it comes to being able to actually get people up into the polls, yeah, it was unfortunately the Democratic message just didn't drive home.
So no doubt every, Democratic leader taking a very hard look at the election day results, especially particularly on this issue, which is really one that they had made a tent pole in their platform, taking a look at the lessons learned from the Democratic Party or for the Democratic Party. What do you think that they have learned when it comes to how to message these issues and how to connect with voters? Because as we saw, it seemed to have fallen flat.
It did. It fell flat. And I think that the Democrats could take a page out of the Republicans' book on this one. They connected with voters via podcasts that I love and watch myself regularly. They went out of their way to get new media and media that would not have been present in other elections. They were able to keep their messages clear. And also, people really don't like any sort of fear or feeling like they're being manipulated into doing something that they don't want to do. So the more clear a message is, the more likely people are going to be able to resonate with it, because it allows them to make their own choice rather than feeling like they're being forced to make a choice.
So looking ahead, these were the 10 states that had the initiative on their ballot, voters making their voice known. But looking towards future elections and future campaign cycles, where do you see this issue falling in future elections with both parties?
So I was curious to see what the presidential election and the midterms as well, when there was so much contentiousness around the issue of reproductive rights, how it was going to turn out. And I think what the public has said is that there are things that are more important to us than this particular issue. And when they would do the polling, the top priorities on each side was the economy. For the longest time. And I think this issue was moving up in the ranks. But I think as time goes on, as we've seen, as time has gone on, it's going to take a little bit more of a back seat. And I think had Democrats known that sooner, they would have messaged differently.
Were there any results about this initiative on any of the 10, in the 10 states that really surprised you? Or did this fall pretty much where you thought that the outcome would be?
So about 60% of eligible voters in the polls we've seen wanted there to be some sort of access to reproductive care. And so, and no restrictions on that. And so it makes sense that there would be 7 out of 10 states that would vote for these measures. It's pretty consistent with what we've seen. But I think the referendum question in Florida was really difficult because they required a supermajority rather than the just a regular majority of over 50%. And I think that was strategic in nature. I really thought they were going to pass it in Florida. I was a little surprised to see that.
Madeline, before we let you go, any last thoughts when it comes to this specific issue, when it comes to the results, when it comes to those exit polls? No doubt you're taking a hard look at the numbers right now.
Yes, and they keep changing, which makes it really difficult. But one thing that really struck me is that in 2020, Joe Biden polled at 15 percentage points higher than Donald Trump did with women voters. In this election, Kamala Harris only polled 10 points higher than Donald Trump did with women voters. I thought that was very interesting and should certainly encourage the Democrats who work on the messaging to cater it a little bit more towards the outcome that they want to see.
Can you share those numbers with me again? Biden polled, what was it?
Yeah. So in this race, I think it was Kamala Harris polled at 44% and Donald Trump at 54%. And then in 2020, you would add 5 more points on for Biden. So
President Biden actually polled higher amongst women than Vice President Harris did.
Yes.
What do you glean from that? She's a woman. And so you would perhaps think that women would feel more connected with another woman. From the numbers that you're sharing with us, that was obviously not the case.
Sure. And I actually love this question because I deal with it all the time as a jury consultant. People think that if you pick a juror who is similar, same gender, same whatever, as your client, that they'll be sympathetic towards one another. And that is a very old school way of thinking. People now identify primarily with whatever they want to. And so I think that in this particular context, you can't just rely on women to come out for the woman. And a lot of times people will do the opposite at trial than what you think they're going to do, specifically because they want to defy expectations. So I can't say that that's what happened here, but I have seen it happen in small group settings.
Well, and Vice President Harris, she was particularly focused on women. I mean, she specifically targeted women to get out and vote. And from the numbers that you're sharing, it's very eye-opening and interesting. And I really appreciate you sharing your perspective as a jury attorney, giving us that insight into perhaps what people believe connects them may not. And in fact, we've been hearing, analysis saying that because Vice President Harris targeted women so much, she alienated potential male voters, and that it does look like that eventually hurt her in the end. Madeline, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.